On Kauai, Hawaii, there's an eccentric little girl who lives with her older sister, a blue fluffy alien dog, an evil scientist, and a cross-dressing cyclops, plus an entire island full of illegal experiments. This is her Ohana. Today, we'll be checking the goodness and the badness levels on her Ohana, as well as those she's not as close with. Aloha! I'm Brad with WickedBinge, and this is Lilo and Stitch, Good to Evil.
This is my family.
Now, we unfortunately don't have the time to cover every single one of the 626 experiments, but don't worry, we will be including some of the more iconic experiments. Let's get started. As usual, we'll be starting our list with the most pure and working our way down. These characters are the good. Winning the gold medal of good is Nani. Despite her just barely being an adult, she has to go from being an older sister to being a parent to her little sister Lilo. Nani is responsible, nurturing and kind, doing everything for her sister, working to provide for her, comforting her when she's sad, and indulging in Lilo's eccentricities. Nani does get frustrated and scolds Lilo at points in the movie, but this is never because she dislikes her sister, it's because she fears losing her to social services.
Do you want to be taken away?
During the film, Nani is constantly trying to prove to the social worker, Cobra Bubbles, that she can be a good guardian, and despite the stress and fear that she has for their future, Nani never blames Lilo.
Why don't you run along, you little cutie?
She'll often come up with ways to shelter her sister from the hardships they face. Nani earns the top spot because of all the sacrifices she makes for her family, and her ability to be one of the only people who understands her strange little sister. Speaking of, taking home the silver is Lilo herself. Lilo may be a rambunctious, strange child, but she is also just that, a child. Many of her less positive traits come from the traumatic death of her parents, and her getting bullied by other children for not acting how they want her to.
You hit her?
Before I bit her.
But when you look past some of her behavioral issues, Lilo is a very sweet and creative little girl. After meeting Stitch at a dog pound, she instantly decides he's who she wants to adopt. Despite how badly he behaves toward her, Lilo never turns her back on Stitch and tries her best to teach him to be good.
Be careful of the little angel!
Being around Stitch shows us a more responsible and mature side of Lilo, and it's because of Lilo's big heart that she's able to finally get through to Stitch, as well as most of the other 625 experiments, to reform their ways and embrace the spirit of Ohana.
This is my family. I found it.
The third place for good goes to the CIA agent turned social worker, Cobra Bubbles.
This did not go well.
While he starts the movie being an antagonist to Nani and Lilo, Mr. Bubbles never actually does anything bad. His job is to protect children in dangerous situations, and as hard as Nani tried, Lilo was in a dangerous situation.
You left the stove on while you were out.
He wasn't hard on Nani because he wanted to or because he was evil in any way, but he just wanted her to understand that he needed to be sure Lilo was safe. It was a tough situation, and he showed that he knew that and tried to give Nani a chance. Thankfully, by the end of the film, he realizes that Nani is capable of raising Lilo, and he even saves Stitch from being arrested by pointing out a loophole to keep the blue fugitive on Earth with his new family.
Didn't you buy that thing at the shelter?
Following close behind, we have the Grand Councilwoman. The leader of the Galactic Federation is a very firm yet very fair woman who values order and rules, but also is willing to make exceptions. Her initial desire to eliminate Stitch came purely from a pretty fair assumption that Stitch was just plain evil, to which even his creator, Jumba, would often attest to.
It is the flawed product of a deranged mind.
She had every right to want to protect the galaxy, which, mind you, we all inhabit. However, when presented with evidence to the contrary, via a 6-year-old Hawaiian girl, the Grand Councilwoman spared Stitch and his merry band of galactic criminals.
We'll be checking in now and then.
Now, how many space bureaucrats do you know that would do the same? Next is the titular blueberry goblin himself, Stitch. Make no mistake, Stitch is a very nasty little man, and in the beginning was a literal fluffy ball of pure destruction. But he is proof that you are not defined by your upbringing, and that with enough love and support, anyone can choose to be good.
You came back.
Nobody gets left behind.
and Stitch has a glitch, Stitch begins to face involuntary relapses of his former chaotic self and is terrified of hurting his friends. Stitch certainly isn't perfect, but considering the monumental task of transforming oneself from the epitome of destruction into a really good dog, he certainly deserves a great deal of credit.
Stitch, okay now?
We come next to the greatest fashion icon of this era, Pleakley.
Agent Pleakley at your service.
While Pleakley never did anything actually evil, he also was rarely of any help, mostly sticking to the sidelines if not getting in the way. It shouldn't be diminished though that Pleakley's greatest strength comes from his intense desire to keep life on Earth safe, even before it became cool at the end of the movie. Granted, he was mostly concerned with mosquitoes in the beginning. He quickly came to know and love all life on Earth. Pleakley was the OG chill alien and should definitely be an honorary RuPaul's Drag Race winner.
Please, go about your business. I'm okay.
Now we have the fire-breathing Hawaiian himbo, David. David is a simple man, simple as they come. He likes surfing, he likes Nani, he likes fire breathing, he likes Nani.
Did you catch fire again?
Nah, just the stage.
He may not be all that complex, but what he does do, he does with a lot of devotion. He's dedicated to Nani's happiness and comfort, fully taking stock on her incredibly complex life situation, which is a level of commitment most young men wouldn't be willing to take on. David may be the most normal character in the series, but he also provides some much-needed stability in Lilo and Nani's complicated lives.
Nani, is there something I can do?
Next, we have Victoria. While she only shows up in the TV series, we wanted to give her a quick shout-out here. Victoria is Lilo's best and only human friend. She's a sweet and friendly girl who's willing to accept the strange behaviors of her friend. Even when Myrtle tries to get her to abandon Lily in order to hang out with her, Victoria refuses and stays by her friend's side.
By the way, I like your hair.
Like David before her, Victoria's loyalty and stability are much needed pieces of Lilo's life. Mrs. Hasegawa is shown to be a kind old woman with some sight and hearing impairments. Because of these disabilities, she ends up housing a grand total of 15 illegal experiments in her home, believing them to be stray cats.
Oh, such a good kitty.
Regardless of the mistake, she's still very loving with her horde of aliens, and they enjoy living and being a family with Mrs. Hasegawa. She also holds the record for most experiments performed at once, and that's nothing to sneeze at, considering how difficult these little monsters can be in the beginning.
They're the only one I've got.
It was bound to happen eventually. Ladies and gentlemen, we have arrived at Lady Stitch, or Angel. She arguably holds the most power of anyone, purely in the context of this particular list, as she has the ability to turn people good or evil.
She is perfect budgeable material for 626.
After being coerced by Gantu into turning Stitch evil, Angel actually sacrificed herself being captured in order to save Stitch in the name of love. She was lucky enough to be freed off screen so she could participate in the final movie. Don't question it, just let Stitch have this, okay? Next, we have Stitch's first on-screen cousin, Sparky. This one is pretty well cut and dry, as Lilo was helpful enough to make us an actual chart, showing just how good Sparky actually is compared to Stitch in the beginning.
Isn't he cute? He's got your smile.
Sparky may have been a bit of a rascal, but he made his amends and decided to work for the greater good of the town and join Lilo and Stitch's wacky extended family. And what more could you ask for than that?
You need something really big to play with.
Now we come to the end of the good category, and who more appropriate to bookend this category than the mostly reformed mad scientist Jumba. I do say mostly because although he is let off the hook by the Grand Councilwoman after starting the mess of the first movie, he couldn't manage to keep his nose clean for long, and ended up further experimenting with Stitch's cousins.
I designed this creature for it to be unstoppable.
That very experimenting which ended in them all escaping and wreaking havoc that took 2 movies and a TV show to fix. He should be cut some slack though, because the evil nature of his experiments is mostly to Von Homsterviel's blame, and he does show genuine respect for Stitch and his other creations, and does grow to care for them all. He also cares deeply for his newfound family, and especially Pleakley, who is definitely his boyfriend, right? Like, can we all agree on that? Seriously, watch the movies and tell me they weren't in a relationship.
I'm not talking to you.
Now that we've covered the good characters, we move into more neutral territory. This is the gray area. Starting off the gray area, we have the character you've all been waiting for, Ice Cream Guy. We don't know much about this character, but what we do know is that this character is extremely brave and resilient. Every single time this man goes outside to enjoy a cone of mint chocolate chip ice cream, he faces the devastating loss of his cone, and yet he still puts himself out there time and time again. He could have become angry or paranoid, like the cabbage guy from Avatar, but he has always stuck to his guns and embraces every beautiful and terrifying day trapped on Lilo and Stitch's extraterrestrial playground with the same brave face. Ice Cream Guy may not be good or bad, so he finds himself here in the gray. But make no mistake, if this were a list of the bravest Lilo and Stitch characters, this man would rocket to the top. Up next, we have Stitch's older brother and the man whose online flash game inspired an entire era of future sandwich artists, 625 or Ruben. Ruben really does define true neutral. He has all the exact same powers and capabilities as Stitch, and even has an increased understanding and mastery of the English language, but that also apparently came with a penchant for sandwich making that possibly teeters on addiction.
I need to know our coordinates. I just got us a deal on a bunch of baloney.
Ruben has plenty of skin in the game, considering that he was a part of the experiments and finds himself tangled up in the wicked web of Gantu and Hamsterville's evil schemes, but he simply chooses just to make sandwiches instead. He was fully capable of single-handedly apprehending Stitch and would have certainly succeeded with Gantu and Hamsterville's minimal help, but he was simply uninterested. Though he did spend some time in the evil corner, in the end, Ruben actually does transition fully to good, with some extremely light persuasion from Lilo. Ruben always went with the flow, and don't we all wish we can be so carefree?
Unlimited lifetime supply of sandwiches.
Moses Paloki, or as he's better known to his students, Kumu, is Lilo's hula instructor. Good teachers aren't always as easy to come by, and that task becomes much harder when students are uncooperative. Therefore, it's no small feat that this educator is able to wrangle a gaggle of 6 with Lilo among the ranks, and do so without yelling at them.
Lilo, why are you all wet?
However, to his discredit, he does witness a lot of Myrtle's bullying firsthand, and does absolutely nothing to reprimand her. Suffice to say, he's not a villain, but he's also not the hero. And finally, we arrive at the dark side. These are the bad and the evil. On the low end of bad are Myrtle's clique of friends, Elena, Teresa, and Yuki. We've decided to lump them all together, seeing as they never really stray far from each other. These kids are fairly one-note in their personalities, serving almost exclusively as accessories to Myrtle. On rare occasions, they can be outright malicious, but they usually just blindly agree with Myrtle and do very little.
If you have rabies, the dog catcher are gonna have to cut you. Are you gonna play dolls?
In the series, it's revealed that they don't really like Myrtle and only hang out with her to avoid being bullied themselves. However, this is a poor excuse, as their complacency only makes the problem worse rather than better. Like, there are no way demons, but they certainly aren't angels.
Myrtle was right. You really are weird.
Further down the path of evil stands Gantu, the former head goon of the Grand Councilwoman, and also former head goon of Von Hamsterville.
Wants his experiments back.
This big gallant cannot seem to catch a break. Even as competent as he may or may not be, he's constantly failing in his endeavors of evil.
I am retiring you, Captain Gantu.
In fact, his place further away from the most evil is in no small part due to the fact that he literally cannot ever succeed at being evil. In the end, he actually betrays his evil leader and decides that this whole evil thing just isn't worth it anymore.
He's on the Aloha team now.
Too little too late though, considering he spent the entire series before that moment being one of the main antagonists. Standing now at the bronze gates of evil is Myrtle. If you were ever picked on in school, this bossy runt definitely struck a chord with you.
And anything everything that you come up with is gonna be stinky.
Lilo was certainly never the most normal girl her age, but Myrtle had no business shunning and outright mocking this little girl. You can argue that Lilo deserved it after attacking her, but let the record show that Myrtle was the one who started it, and I will not allow my client to be slanderized further by a toddler with a big fluffy Dorito for hair.
You're crazy.
I rest my case. Second to last on the evil list is Leroy. This is actually a pretty easy pick that doesn't require much explanation. Leroy is an exact copy of Stitch, who just happens to have zero goodness juice in him.
Leroy, destroy him!
He's completely saturated with evilness juice and was beyond saving. While this is fairly antithetical to the series' message as a whole, canon is canon, and Leroy was one bad dude. Finally, with the crown of evil is Dr. Von Hamsterwheel. Dr. Von Hamsterville.
Hamsterville! It is Hamsterville!
A small gerbil-like creature with the Napoleon complex, this scientist is vile and pure evil. Even though he doesn't show up until the second movie, he has taken his role as the main antagonist of the saga very seriously. Working with Jumba, Dr. Hamsterville commissioned all of the 626 experiments, and thus is equally responsible for them being made. But while Jumba redeemed himself and became a better being, Hamsterville did not. His main goal is to recapture all the lost experiments so he can have a personal army to conquer the galaxy, and he will come up with any dirty scheme to reach his goal.
My ransom demand was for all the experiments!
Lucky for us, his lack of competence is rivaled only by Ruben and Gantu. And that finishes off our list. Who do you think was the most good or most evil? Don't forget to hit that notification bell and binge our Good to Evil playlist, where we break down the morality of the characters of your favorite cartoons, movies, and shows. But most importantly, stay wicked.